Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, sometimes at 1:05 if something goes a bit funny, both here in the building and live online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name's Martin O'Leary. I am the studio community lead here. I'm a white man in my early 40s with long hair and a beard, wearing a red jumper today because it's autumn. It's jumper season. Woo! Thank you for that enthusiasm. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday. And this is where we offer you the chance to spend some time in the space by hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio. Who's new to the studio? First time? Okay, one or two. Welcome. This bit's for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We are a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, the University of the West of England and the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council England. And we offer studio space, desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities, all for free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So quick bit of housekeeping. Feel free to move around, make a cup of tea, grab a glass of water from the kitchen. We've got a quiet space just through to my left, to your right, around the corner there. If you need to take a break at any point, just pop around the corner. Fire exits at either end of the studio over on that side. If you hear a fire alarm, that's probably real. We're not got anything planned. Some of the studio team will direct you. And there are accessible toilets and baby change. I have been plugging baby change every time. There is an actual baby in the audience this week. Very excited. There is baby change in the corridor over there next to the kitchen. And there'll be a Q&A at the end of the talk. For those of you who are watching online, please pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Emma will be your voice in the room today. If you're in the room, just stick your hand up. I'll send a microphone around. You can get news on all of our future talks by going to watershed.co.uk/studio, at PM Studio UK on Twitter, also known as X, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right, our speaker for today is Tom Bailey. Tom is a theatre maker, director, and studio resident. Through his company Mechanimal, he makes work exploring fresh narratives of a changing planet Earth. He's also going to be joined online today by Javier Velastin, who's also a studio resident and a sound designer. And today they're going to be talking about their latest project, Megalith, and the ongoing exploration of the Neolithic origins of mining and the relationship between rocks and technology. Also, if you're here in the space, about 2:30, so after the talk, after you've had a little bit of a break, there will be some time to do some testing with Tom, so please stick around if you're interested in that. But for now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Tom.
Cool. Thanks, Martin. Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming. My name's Tom, and I'm creative director of a company called Mechanimal. And today, just going to talk a bit about a project that is ongoing called Megalith. And it's made with studio residents Javier Velastin, as well as Limbic Cinema, plus a couple of familiar faces, Jack Offord here, as well as Tarim, assisting in the development of it. So just going to give a quick intro to the work of the company and what I do, and then focus a bit more on this Megalith project. So that's going to be about 20 minutes, and then probably have Javier is going to join us 10 minutes online to talk about the sound aspects of what we're doing. So Megalith, the project, exists as a theatre piece at the moment, and I'm kind of doing this talk at the moment because through a funding body called Innovate UK, we're developing an installation around the same themes of the project. So this is the kind of point where the installation is a very embryonic stage. It'd be great to kind of open out any questions and ideas to the room, and hence that test session we're doing a bit later on today. A journey into rocks, technology, and performance is what Megalith is. So I'm a performer by trade. I do kind of physical device performance about the natural world, and a key interest for me is exploring, I guess, what it is to make theatre or be in a kind of communal art space at a time of the Anthropocene, of climate change, how we connect or in a kind of changing relationship with non-human others and other species. So this was a show about a marsh warbler, a little bird that migrates from Africa to the UK. That was made back in 2019, and we did a lot of rehearsal in the Somerset wetlands around Ham Wall there. This is a show, the following show in 2019, called Vigil, which explored the kind of the state of endangered and extinct species on the planet, looking at the IUCN Red List. So trying to explore 26,000 species in the space of an hour within a show. So here's a little kind of 1-minute video kind of summarizing that project. Okay, so that video was very kindly made by Jack, sat in the audience there. And a couple of geologists saw that show back in 2019, and they were at Bristol University. And they quite enjoyed it, and they said, Tom, would you like to make a show about rocks? And that was a kind of a bit of a novel shift for me. I was like, okay, well, I'm used to kind of doing, you know, species and doing animals and things, and then it kind of, I guess, opened up a whole new kind of journey for Mechanimal at that point. So this is an Edward Bertinsky kind of aerial portrait. I'm not exactly sure where this is in the world, but I guess brings me to kind of #1 point that mines are big, and this is a kind of big topic. And I think the first thing that kind of really struck me when coming to kind of mining and rocks is that dealing with the kind of the scale of landscape and of issues surrounding mining, which I'll get to in a minute. Yeah, we spent, with COVID delays, we spent about 3 years developing a theatre show called Megalith, which premiered last year. And I'll just again show a quick video and then unpack the themes of that and how it relates to the installation that we're making.
As an investor, the ascent of man.
Okay, so, and that was a picture of the show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival last year. And as maybe kind of came across a little bit in the video, kind of key themes here are about energy, time, and the relationship between rocks and technology. And our project, that particular show, focused on the narrative of copper. So that was a key focus of researchers John Blundy and Stephen Sparks that we collaborated with at Bristol University. But I mean, the long and short of it is that copper is the oldest mineral in the world to be mined. And it's kind of coming back to a kind of critical role at present in terms of how we're essentially going to reach sustainability goals and our energy future. It's connected to a number of different kind of critical metals, but copper was our main focus for this show, kind of hence the color. So I guess looking for a way into the show and the theme, which was quite kind of foreign to the team starting out, I guess a key point of interest for me was looking at the whole history of mining, and that kind of the theme of copper kind of legitimized this kind of perspective of, you know, why did mining start? Why did it start with copper, and when did it start? And what were the conditions of mining when when humans first started to take stuff out of the ground? It started about 10,000 years ago, and there are some of the oldest mines in the world here in Britain. Especially in Wales, near like Anglesey, you find like old Neolithic mines that essentially amazingly dug out with antler picks and stones. So Neolithic miners would see a kind of a seam of copper, which is visible from ground level, and would essentially just follow that over thousands of years, and you see this kind of like rabbit warren just emerging through the rock over several millennia, which is quite a beautiful thing. On the Llandudno Peninsula, there's an amazing copper mine. But I'll get to the bit of the Neolithic stuff later. But in terms of the kind of present kind of focus or demand around critical metals and why they're important. So essentially, big narrative at the moment is we're trying to reach 2050 net zero. We've got these big UN goals. Getting off fossil fuels requires, if we're to sustain our present and increasing level of energy output, we need more metals, and we need to find amazing new ways of mining more metals. And it's a thing that I guess when we think about climate change, and we're all aware of extinction, we're all aware of like emissions, but I find that in general, the kind of public awareness of how critical a part this is of the whole kind of climate change debate and world is not so many people know about it. So I guess it looks a bit sort of complex, but essentially kind of key metals that ones that we're focusing on are, of course, copper, which is essential for wiring. It's the best conductor by far. Graphene is also a good conductor, but it's way too expensive. So copper is the metal of choice that's economically possible. Cobalt and lithium are also things that we're really focusing on. For this particular development of the installation, we're focusing on tin as well. And those four metals, copper, cobalt, lithium, and tin, we're all critical for batteries and energy future. I guess it's also really important to think about where these metals come from. I guess this slide shows that a lot of them are processed in China, but they're actually mined. Most of the world's copper comes from Chile. Most of the world's cobalt comes from the DRC. And as per here, a lot of the world's lithium comes from Australia. And of course, those countries have massively different conditions and economic conditions of mining, which I guess we kind of need to be aware of. I guess mining's been a difficult subject to deal with because it generally has a very bad press. It's a dirty, massive industry with a lot of economic and colonial issues that are shady. It's not all black and white. I guess, in Chile, the mining industry has now been, for some time nationalized, and it's really important to the country's economy, and generally the conditions of mining are quite good. compared to somewhere like the DRC, where you still got a lot of what is very weirdly called artisanal mining, which is essentially, young kids going down mines for like $2 a day and just picking whatever they can, right the way through to multinational companies going in and setting up big mining projects and say, hey, we're going to transform the economy of this country. So still lots of questions about, if we need more stuff, where's it going to come from? Is it fair that it's going to come from those places? And where does that money go? And do we have the resources and technological capability to increase copper mining by 5 times? Kind of not, really, at the moment. So it's a bit of an issue that isn't just a foreign issue, although it's not named in the kind of chart here. Tin is quite an important metal in the UK. So in Cornwall, where you've got a lot of old copper and tin mines that, literally the pole dart mines, they're still there down around St. Just. You can go and see these wonderful kind of 17th, 18th century sort of tin mine funnels sitting on the coast. Few of them are looking at potentially being reopened. I think the last operating tin mine closed in Cornwall in 1986 because it became more economically viable to just open tin mines in other countries. But now, considering the price of tin, it's now economically viable to reopen mines in Cornwall. And that's a kind of serious thing that's happening on our shores and is affecting those communities nearby. And there's a big debate in areas like that. You've also got other rare metals. I don't know if I quite got the name right, but iridium, which is, for instance, used in our mobile phone screens, is something that is found in those mines as well. So you've got kind of real interest in that country there. So I guess to kind of put in a nutshell some of the themes of the project that I guess we've been exploring. So I guess I felt the Megalith as both a theatre show and the installation we're developing. It's not about giving any kind of answers or any kind of clear solutions to a problem that we're facing. It's more kind of trying to provide audiences and participants a space to kind of engage with some of the themes and start to think about, well, where do we go from here as people and as a civilization? Is an aim to have, more mining helps us achieve our climate goals. How do we start exploring mining as something critical that isn't just about something that's really, really good and create economic profit, or really bad and is, destructive, evil, and generally bad for the planet? Like literally, as a thought experiment, if you look around at every piece of technology in this room, and in your imagination, just replace it with a rock. That's how critical mining is to everything we do here, especially in the Pervasive Media Studio, where we're so reliant on technology. Laptops, wires, everything. It's just a stone transformed into a metal. I guess relating to this idea of we need more mining to kind of create more technology to achieve a sustainable transition, we've got a bit of an issue like, well, is that really what we want to be doing? Like, is that still a kind of like a sustainable thing to just mine more, get more stuff, mine more resources, achieve more growth? Is that model achieving more economic prosperity, or is it creating greater inequality? Is it about, in some way, trying to take stock of this path that we've been on since about 10,000 years ago, through first the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age, and then la-di-da, of just people taking stuff out of the ground, creating tech, and developing civilization? Is climate change now kind of bringing that trajectory, that linear trajectory, under a microscope? And lastly, a question about smashing tech up. A previous title of this talk was Smash Your Tech Up, which is something that I guess is part of the project, but we've decided to kind of take out of our installation that we were developing. So in the show, we kind of explored reverse mining, i.e. on stage, smashing up laptops and going back to kind of Neolithic mining. But I feel in a public context, quite a lot of kind of health and safety issues around asking the public to kind of break apart iPhones and technology. So we'll just, probably health and safety wise on a limited budget, we'll kind of keep it to stones. But nonetheless, that idea comes from another part of the solution, is something, maybe you've come across it, urban mining. Bigger on the continent in Europe than it is here at the moment, but it's essentially taking used tech and mining that to reuse and recycle resources. It's not in any way going to meet the demands that we need, but it's kind of something that's part of the equation. So, how am I doing with time? Okay, I'll try and rattle on for a little bit and then hand over to Javier. So I guess coming to our installation and the thing that we're developing now, I guess one of the things that I really want to do is just bring people closer to, I guess, that's something that's kind of critical for the company, is just like, how do we make contact with non-human others at this time? What is it to behold something like malachite? This is a copper ore, and just I find working with stone so much like beauty and art within the stone itself, that it's like that's kind of amazing. And if I can make a piece that somehow kind of opens out an experience to the rocks themselves, that's something I really want to do. That's all right. I was talking to her as well. This is similarly beautiful cassiterite. This is a base ore of tin. You find this stuff in Cornwall, and it's just really beautiful and magical to kind of behold and work with this kind of stuff. However, there is kind of an economic side to this. So rocks like this, I wish I could work with them at scale. I can't, because this is a museum piece, incredibly valuable. All of our critical minerals are incredibly valuable. But what we can work with at scale is actually where it all started. So we can, flint, which was the de facto kind of like Neolithic tool for years and years, and the stone that they worked with, that's available, that's cheap as chips right now. So you can order about half a ton for 300 quid and just have loads of rocks. So, so all of it, we're essentially making an installation out of flint, which is a beautiful kind of, you get lots of these little kind of Henry Moore sculptures, shapes of flint, which this afternoon we'll be doing a little bit of a test with. But that kind of brings us to the Neolithic side of it. And maybe I'll just touch on why I felt this was a sort of legit way in for the company and for me, and what line to circle means. So I guess in dealing with making any work of art, I try and think about, okay, well, where is the company speaking from? Where am I speaking from? And is it legitimate to speak from this position? So I think in the context of mining, you've got something in copper mining. It was like, well, how there's something going on in Chile, and what angle do we kind of approach this theme from? How can I approach something from that feels like maybe that is also connected to England, where I'm from? And so I guess being very interested in kind of like and connected to the southwest landscape, I felt, okay, we're here in an amazing kind of like southwest England. You get the highest concentration of stone circles and kind of Neolithic artwork, one of the highest concentrations in the world. And I guess that connected me to the time when mining started. This is, of course, an aerial view of Stonehenge, and it maybe makes this idea of line to circle a little bit clearer. And the more I kind of looked at stone circles in the region, this idea of line to circle I saw was kind of repeated across a lot of the stone circles. Avebury, a lot of them in Cornwall, have essentially an avenue into a circle. And I kind of felt, actually, maybe is that an interesting kind of metaphor to work with, where I guess if it doesn't seem too much of a bodge, if we've been on this linear trajectory of resource extraction for about 10,000 years, how can we find more circularity, sustainability, within the present context of climate change and our resource use. So, I mean, that's roughly kind of a kind of justification for kind of grounding our work in some of the kind of Neolithic themes of the piece. That's an aerial view of Stonehenge, and it's kind of how we're starting to build our installation, inviting people into a circle of stones. I mean, if we're going to be really kind of like academic about it, it's a little bit of a fudge, because mining started in about 8,000 years before Stonehenge was built. We're already in the Bronze Age by the time Stonehenge was built. So this is the kind of high period for any kind of archaeologists out there. This is the high period of stone art, when they're already smelting and metal and using kind of bronze saws. So mining, copper was discovered. You get this interesting period where it was like just kind of used as stuff like jewelry, or like there was no kind of like it seems like not massive like functional development for about 2,000 or 3,000 years, and then about 1,000 years after that, they discovered that you could smelt copper with tin, which was also discovered, and then you could make bronze, and your sword doesn't fall apart. It actually stays in one piece when you try and hit someone. So that's what started off the Bronze Age. You get economic growth and wealth through the Bronze Age. So the people and the communities who built Stonehenge were pretty much at the high point of that Bronze Age wealth. So yes, contemporary, modern, making stones and putting stones in an art space. I guess just wanted to touch on, I guess, a couple of, sorry for the pun, touchstones for us, artistic touchstones. Things that have inspired us. Local artist Richard Long, who's been working with stones, making stone circles and configurations for years. There's something deeply beautiful about, I don't know, just giving stones space to speak. And I guess they hold a lot of presence and silence and power just on their own. And we kind of want to be really aware of that, in the same way that I guess you just do an Olaf or Eliasson thing when you've got a lot of money and put a landscape in a space. It's very powerful and awesome. I guess us as a team, we're also thinking, well, how can we allow that sort of sense of simplicity and a space for meditation, with also dealing with some of the complex themes that we're looking at. So just a sneak preview of where we're going with that. This is our kind of stage one kind of sketch of what we've been trying out. We've got projecting onto the floor inside a stone circle and exploring various themes of projection within that, how we can make it interactive. That's it from the outside, so we project down into the space and have different sound and projection narratives that kind of guide and assist audience experience. So that maybe brings us on to sound. Javier, are you there?
Hiya.
Hey. So this is, away you go. Cool.
Cool. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Javier, I'm a sound artist. I am a Latin American with glasses, headphones, and a little beard. Very sort of nerd look today, but I promise I'm very cool. So my practice is sort of in performance making, theatre sound design, more recently sort of video sound design, video game sound design, and usually sort of working at a crossover sort of between various different art forms and practices. And I joined the studio in 2020, early 2020, to work on a piece called Whale Song, which was kind of all about the voices in the sea and sort of our relationship to different consciousnesses or different intelligences, and the acoustic ecology of the ocean and things like that. And through involvement in that, I met Tom, and we started working together on Megalith. So I just wanted to kind of go through a few of the things that were interesting for me, and the stuff that I can kind of unlocked a bit with sound stuff throughout this process. And I've also got a couple of sound clips that I'd like to play as well. So I guess one of the things that was interesting for me was like inner or hidden sound worlds, sort of related again to other parts of my practice, like the whale song about kind of the sea. This kind of idea of like there is kind of these hidden sound worlds within rocks or within a deep time and geological time that's interesting to unpack within the context of environmental art being something that is so often kind of simplified or reduced to something that is quite either like an anthropocentric sort of natural sound is this beautiful healing thing and that's all that it can be, or is that this kind of reducing it to kind of nature being something that is not us, that has nothing to do with humanity, and we have this kind of nature culture humans and the organic inorganic kind of divide. And kind of just I've always been interested in how technological things can also be visceral, and how sort of like natural things or organic things can also have a kind of like inorganic structure or be kind of part of these kind of inorganic approaches. So the way, for me, the kind of way in was this question that Tom sort of highlighted of like sort of what's the reason that we started extracting things, and what is that going to do to us? Like, is there a new or different or older way of being with rocks that might kind of see us through this predicament that we're in terms of the kind of energy sort of paradox, and also a kind of wider thing of like how we're going to live with the world as it is, because the current models are unsustainable and are damaging and are kind of like, you know, they are interrelated to loads of sort of other forms of inequality and unfairness, and yeah, so to kind of think about how you can kind of unlock that with sound maybe. So yeah, and I guess yeah, the other thing was just interesting for me is that, like, you know, Tom's process is very sort of R&D-ish, exploratory, investigative process, and that's something that I'm more in tune with, rather than a straight sort of, you know, sound design, create some sounds for this thing. It's like, what are they telling us? So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is like materiality and sound materiality. About that, also kind of like listening to rock and what it is. So I first took that like pretty literally, like thinking about miking up rock. So using in particular contact microphones, which are special microphones that hear through solids rather than through air, and attaching them to rocks and then just kind of hitting them together and creating little sort of sound palettes and seeing what they sound like. And you kind of discover all this variety of how, you know, each rock is, you know, subtly, the shape is very different or the consistency is very different, and so each one makes these different sounds and all the surfaces make different sounds. And so then kind of ended up with this kind of remember very early on in the megalith sort of story, with a kind of foley table full of little rocks and metal objects, and then we were kind of improvising with them and improvising movements and discovering kind of how the actual sort of like, you know, like trying to be like, how can I relate to this rock in now times, and what could that say of the way that they might have related to rock in different times, like, yeah, 10,000 years in the past, 10,000 years in the future. So lots of free-form exploration with rock, which then kind of get distilled and became part of the Megalith theatre show. And yeah, conceptually thinking, how do rocks speak? What sounds have passed through these rocks over the billions of years that they've been there, or whatever? Like, you know, can we listen to them and hear what they say? What have they witnessed, like, of the kind of human and non-human kind of, you know, changes, and how have the way that we listen to them changed? So I wanted to do like a quick sort of listening of a sound clip that I sent to Tom, which was the one that's called Materiality. And I'd kind of invite, like, it's just under 2 minutes, and it's just invite everyone to sort of like close their eyes and listen to it as it's getting played. And yeah, it's made from an array of instruments, so bits of flint, a table with contact mic, Neolithic antler horn, Tibetan singing bowl, and kind of I've been kind of going in and out of it being very unaltered or raw sounds, and then sort of more processed sounds. So yeah, if you could play that clip, and we'll listen to it for a couple of minutes. Yeah. So that was kind of like explorations of materiality. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, which I'll try and be kind of quick so we can get to Q&A, is like mineral sound worlds. So I'm thinking about the sort of global scale of things. So kind of like this graph that showed kind of where everything comes from, and this idea of like, metals in smartphones coming from all like everywhere in the world. Kind of thinking of this like very, very large scale, but also this kind of rock is nation agnostic. It doesn't sort of exist within the kind of land boundaries. And the other thing that's really interesting for me is this kind of like this concept of kind of ore and refining, and this kind of like each metal has a million different types of ore, but that's just because like really the whole thing is so fluid and combined. Like there's no two rocks that are the same thick consistency or the same balance of everything. And like ore is really just a kind of sort of vague kind of guess at what the kind of common consistencies are. And sort of just thinking about this idea of like scale was really interesting to me. So one of the things we've been exploring, especially in the installation version, which is kind of about sort of like the actual sort of sound maps of the places themselves, and kind of thinking about what is the sound of where these minerals are important and where these minerals are mined and where they come from. So one big part of that has been field recording and finding kind of sourcing sounds from various kind of things on the internet, so sound maps and stuff. There's one called Apari, Sitting in Memories. There's just loads of kind of like areas that you can pull out field recordings from Congo or from Australia or whatever it is, that the places that we're going to focus on. And when as well as getting some of the kind of the actual sounds of the places, I'm also interested in not literally the sound of this specific mine in this specific place, but cultural signifiers or sort of evocative sound worlds of the region, or that have got to do with the kind of culture of mining around then. So for instance, in Chile, where there's like it's copper, malachite, that's the kind of like metal we're focusing on in terms of one of the metals that we're focusing on. The sound of kind of open salt flats and kind of like birds flying overhead, pampas, barren mountains. This is the kind of backdrop of all the topographies that are around the minerals that we're kind of focusing on there. So I'm going to play the next clip, which is Mineral Sound Worlds, and this one is specifically to do with cobalt and stuff from the DRC, and it's just a kind of mini mix of kind of larger soundscape, which will be playing throughout the installation. So if you could play the Mineral Sound Worlds clip, please. So yeah, that was the sort of mineral sound worlds, and just kind of all this mix of kind of very little and kind of abstracted ideas around place. And I think that's something that we're interested in exploring more and more. And yeah, I think that's the end of me, and we can kind of go on to the next bit.
Off with a quick slide, then open to kind of QA. So just kind of feeding off what Javi was saying, and like where we go with developing this installation that we're really just at the start of developing across this autumn. How can we develop an experience that invites people into a kind of physical contact with with the stones and with a sense of time, which is I guess, a critical thing that we're exploring here. These stones holding this incredible time. How can we do that through touch, through sound, through visual? And I think there's a tech question of what is the interactive element of it for us. We're still exploring how can we either track stones or people in the space that maybe trigger kind of sound or visual content as they cross that stone circle. That's still something that we're exploring. And I guess for me it's always, you know, dealing with kind of environmental themes. There's always lots of kind of interesting stuff, especially about rocks and copper, and I guess some interesting info about it. But yet, how to make a piece that actually is a really interesting kind of experience, an abstract experience that isn't necessarily about going into a science museum and getting an info download, but is able to balance a bit more those kind of like abstract elements with some really kind of interesting info or info poems. And yeah, of course, yeah, I guess for us as an ongoing question, what does it mean to make work with rocks and alongside rocks at this time? What agency do rocks have in the piece and over us? So, but yeah, I think we can open out the floor to any kind of questions and bring Javier back. Hi again, you all right? So yeah, that's it really. That's what we're doing. And if anyone's got any questions, we've got a few minutes, and then I can just finish up with a quick plug for our test schedule this autumn. Do you want to be involved?
All right, yeah, I think we've got a little while for questions. Anyone got a question? Give you that.
I just wanted to know.
It works. You just can't hear yourself in the room.
I just wanted to know if in the first clip that we listened to, if there were any effects added, just out of curiosity.
The very first one was sorry, do you mean the sound clip or the video clips that Tom showed?
Materiality, something like that.
Yeah. So there was a mixture of different things. So it was started the very beginning of that. Can you hear me, right?
Yep. Have you gone?
Yep. The materiality one started with basically explorations of rock on rock kind of grinding, and then I used this thing I developed called the impact granulator, which was a kind of way of expanding, basically capturing all of the kind of impact sounds and then putting them in a bank and then firing them back off. So it's kind of this sort of reprocessing thing to make it sound sort of bigger and wider. And then of course there's like a bit of sort of conventional stuff like making it the scale up by kind of big sort of reverby sounds and big kind of like pitch shifting sounds and stretching it in various other ways. But it's all like created from the original rock material, if you know what I mean.
Thank you.
Anybody else got a question?
Hey, in terms of the history of the rocks that you're thinking about, the sounds it experienced, is igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic rock something that you've explored as a property of the minerals that you look at?
No, it's not, but maybe it should be. Yeah, I guess looking at how the different, I guess we're really interested visually in terms of the different crystalline structures of rock, but I guess sonically haven't explored how they might hear or receive sound differently. That could be really interesting. Thank you.
Hi, Javier, you probably weren't able to hear, but while your first sound clip was playing in the room, there was also quite a noisy helicopter for us outside, which was actually, I don't know if other people noticed that. There was, wasn't there? Yeah. Which was quite nice. And so we had this very sort of close, sort of delicate, small sound happening while there was this sort of quite echoey, distant sound that also sort of placed us here. And it just made me wonder a little bit about that relationship in an installation to sort of the space that you're in, and then to the world around, the space you're in within the world you've built for us, and then the space we're in and the world around us, and where you might site the installation and what those relationships could look like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that the helicopter kept to schedule as I had planned it. I think, yeah, I'm definitely, I really like invasive, so I really like sound bleed. I really like what it kind of does when you kind of have a place, but then everything else is kind of going into it. So I think the choice of where we're going to do it is going to really inform a lot of the sort of sound world on it. I definitely don't want to sort of try and limit that at all. But yeah, that's a cool observation.
Seems like there's quite a lot of the presence of a desire to change how we relate to the non-human, and to change how we relate to our environment in the piece. And I'm wondering how much that relationship is embodied in your working practice, and how much there is a kind of intention to bring the audience into a different relationship as well through the piece. It feels like quite an urgent kind of responsibility of us as culture makers, isn't it, to bring about that shift in culture, even on a kind of micro level. So I'm just wondering, how much is that embodied in your working practice as a team, but like behind the scenes, and how much is it embodied in the experience of the audience?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I guess it maybe relates to Joe's point about where, and I guess so the company has spent time in the landscape with rocks, and that's a kind of critical part of every project. And I'm also interested, I guess, a little bit like one of a landscape artist I mentioned, Olafur Eliasson, who I guess I started to look at his work and wonder why it's very satisfying to take the outside inside into a gallery space. What's that process? What does that mean to not just build a stone circle in a landscape and put lights on it, invite people in it, but to actually do it in perhaps a focus space, a very human space? And how does that bring focus to the objects we're working with? I think within the experience itself, I think I guess it's part of a question about what power does an installation or performance or any artwork have to create change, A, on a local level, and B, at a level that's needed, because I think that question of how is my work creating change often maybe scares me a little bit, because I look at the level of change that's needed on a global scale in the context of climate change. And I guess my approach has been more about providing a kind of space for almost like meditation and I guess being rather than doing, a very soft space that in the context of this piece takes people into a really slow time and invites people to be very slow and invites people to touch and be with rock. And as part of the installation, actually want to invite people to lie down and hold a rock and put bone conducting headphones on and maybe listen to the sounds of the underground. So cultivate a kind of, I guess, a kind of a relational attitude to the rock and presence to the rock, but also a slowing down in terms of time. And I think, I guess we're being a bit cheeky in I guess, exploring how tech also kind of, I suppose, mediates a presence between the rock and the humans, or how we can use tech to imagine what rock is saying by giving rock an AI voice or something like that, or yeah, I think that's an ongoing question for me, is how does technology mediate that human nature relationship?
Anyone else? Couple.
Sorry, it's just like half baked in my head right now, this question. But you mentioned earlier on about flint and how we kind of use flint as cutting tools in the Neolithic period. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Almost, yeah.
So you mentioned earlier on about flint and how we used flint in the Neolithic period to as a sharp edge to cut things mostly, and copper as jewelry. Have you thought about maybe showing the history of our relationship with certain materials? So I always like installations that have something that's quite interactive, and I think there's there's a sort of relationship you develop with things as a human being that means that you feel some sense of emotion towards an object or a material. I think as artists, we all experience that. And you said there's a cognitive and experiential sort of side that you want to kind of combine and make sure people come away with. But how about exploring the relationship that we have with rocks throughout this very long period of time, and how it's changed? I guess that's not really a question, more of a statement, but but is that an element that you've thought about exploring?
Showing the history of sort of mining or technology.
I guess the end product of what you get is back in the Neolithic period, it would have been a sharp flint that could cut rope or cut plant material that was quite tough, through to how now we just mining copper and it's just turning into wires or turning into coils or turning into electrical components, and just showing how maybe rock has become more a part of the furniture rather than this kind of really vital tool that you need to survive.
Yeah. I guess maybe one is big question. I think one kind of quick response to that is I find it really interesting in terms of maybe relating to the question before about how we can provide space to kind of shift perception. And I think a really kind of key kind of thought in approaching rock. We live now in a time where it's almost like it's mere rock. It's just rock to have something kind of extracted from it. And I guess for a long time we've been very fascinated by the idea of organic life on this planet is about plants and about animals, and rock is somehow sort of lower down the pecking order. In terms of the kind of Gaia worldview and the world as a kind of big, superorganism, that changes that perspective, and rocks, depends just what theory or argument you take, they're living beings. One way is to look at them as living beings. But I'm always interested in, I guess, meditating on the question, well, when people first started taking rocks out of the ground and realizing, if I put this rock at high temperature, I get some shiny coppery metal out of it. Rocks at the time, there was a non-functionalist approach to rocks. They were social, they were sacred. People would go to the ends of the earth to build massive circles and drag stones from, Wales or whatever, all the way over to Wiltshire. So stones meant something different, whether they were ancestors or they were just part of the furniture. And we sort of, I guess for me, lost that connection to some extent. And I think that's interesting to kind of explore. Well, within the space of an installation, how can we make stones a little bit magical again and not just mere rock? And on that mere rock thought, you look at some of the waste created from these mines. Copper mining, for every chunk of copper ore that comes out of the ground, 99% of that rock is waste. 1% will go into the metal. the waste will just create a new mountain, tailings mountains, vast amounts of space of waste rock that is just sat there in the Chilean desert. And it's a bit destructive.
I think we have one more. You have a question?
Kind of an answer, but I'll ask it.
Do it.
Yeah, you kind of answered it anyway a little bit just there, but I was kind of interested in your perspective on the mining industry and extractive industries in general, because I kind of assumed that your piece would be kind of like a critique of those industries, but you're also saying that to a certain extent we may need some forms of mining to create a more sustainable future. So I was kind of wondering how your perspective on mining changed as you researched the piece, and like what ideas you had about it before and what ideas you have now.
I guess I came to mining as a bit of a, I guess, you know, I'm an environmental activist, and I came with a sense, I guess, that's in the kind of cultural ether that it's kind of a pretty bad thing. I guess I'm still feel like there's lots of kind of dodgy stuff going on around mining and mining practices, and it is still a destructive practice. Yes, they're trying to innovate sustainable mining solutions, like trying to be non-invasive and to essentially, I don't know how good this is, but leach copper from the earth. So pour liquid in it, and it sort of leaches copper out of the earth, so you don't actually take any rock out of the ground. I'm not sure if that's a viable solution, but I mean, I hope there are no sort of academic geologists here, but I found it a bit of a funny scene, to be honest. In universities, there's quite a close alliance between, I guess you've got an academic industry that is quite closely tied with the industry, like really strong funding links between, say, Rio Tinto and particular positions in the university, and I guess coming from an arts and humanities background, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That I thought I was sort of pitching this project to a room of you know, this was back in 2019. I went and pitched the project to some academics at Leicester, and then there were kind of like corporate mining executives in the room, and you know, literally people from Rio Tinto, and I was like, oh, you know, I don't quite feel comfortable necessarily in that situation. Where's the point where I can kind of, you know, I guess critique these, and I guess the more you look into it, and I researched and understood about it, yeah, there's more. Yeah, it's a very complex topic that has no right and wrong, and I guess now it's a question, well, how to present that complexity. Yeah, that's an ongoing question.
Is there one last question here? Squeeze it
in. So it sounds like you're bringing a voice to the rocks and personifying them through your own like gaze, but I was just wondering how you're going to, or if you're going to bring people's perspectives that are native to the area or living there now, and how you're going to bring their voice to the space as an exhibition, or if you've thought about that, or how you're going about communicating with people and how they feel about this exhibition itself. Yeah, and it's kind of through history. I mean, there's a lot of colonized rocks, and colonization would be so prevalent within these areas, so how that voice is being shared.
Javier, do you want to take this one, or should I?
I mean, from a sort of sound perspective, you know, I think we're like, I'm taking quite a lot of time to sort of listen through to the kind of sound worlds and the narratives that kind of exist in these places as much as you can from a sort of like armchair position, right? I mean, I guess from me, I'm sort of, I don't think, at least from my point of view, I'm not like trying to tell someone else's stories. Like for me, it's kind of about something a little bit more abstract in terms of like connection to rock, rather than being like, you know, I'm representing Chilean stories or whatever, or like, you know, I'm representing Chilean villagers or Chilean miners or like people in, yeah, like, you know, that's not really my vibe. But I think for me it's important to kind of not to reduce the amount that there is like a Western sort of like personification of what these things like necessarily are or aren't. It's more just like this is our how we present something to an audience, or how we present something like through my art, rather than it being like a it's not like a documentary. It's not this sort of I'm not collecting, I'm not archiving when I'm doing sounds. I'm kind of applying my own critical ear to it, into what is an evocative thing. And I think it's just about doing so with like, you know, as much of a deal of like awareness and knowledge that you can of the place, by kind of listening and doing things like that. But it's definitely an ongoing thing. But yeah, that's, at least from a sound perspective, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I guess for me, I guess I'm trying not to personify the rocks. That's almost like an anthropocentric thing of putting something on the rock, and how can I guess an ongoing question is, how can we not do that, but just maybe let the rock be? I guess in terms of exploring things about, you know, the places where rocks come from and communities in those places, I think in the context of where, you know, the project is at, it's about trying to map quite carefully and openly and raise awareness within the piece itself and who experiences it as to where exactly stuff comes from and who is mining it. And I guess, you know, for instance, in the context of the DRC, I imagine you would get a lot of big land ownership issues in Africa, where essentially a multinational comes in and says, I think there was a context, an issue in South Africa, whereby legally they'd managed to sort of wangle it that the local tribe who owned the land only owned the top bit of the land, and the multinational could have access to the stuff underneath that land. And so I guess all sorts of kind of questionable laws made up as to, okay, well, if your ancestry or your family owns this land, then you only own sort of down 10 meters down, and the rest is up for grabs, kind of thing. I think there are things like that which definitely we want to be more kind of part of the kind of dialogue of this piece about, you know, because in mining you're essentially dealing with, you know, I guess origins, where stuff comes from. And then there's questions about who owns that, who has the right to profit from that. Yeah.
All right. I think that's probably all we've got time for. So yeah. I think everyone can say thank you to Tom and Javier. And Tom, do you want to quickly?
Ta-da. So we're building this across the autumn, and if any of this sort of sounded interesting to you, we are like really helpful in development of an experience or a thing is being able to test it with people. So we've only just done one kind of baby step first, and we've got these four test dates in yellow. And what we've done is we've created an Eventbrite link. So if you are free and fancy coming along to help us solve some issues and explore some questions about what might be the audience experience or the visitor experience, then at 3 o'clock on any of these times, you can book your slot on Eventbrite, and we've got a bit of cash to cover your transport. So I don't know if anyone knows the Bottle Yard Studios, which is a film and TV studios in South Bristol. There's a direct M1 bus there from the centre, but it'll take a little while to get there, but there's tea and coffee and food when you get there. We're able to cover your transport, and yeah, it'd be great. It's just an hour of your time just to kind of help us make and develop the experience, and maybe you get to see the fruit of your amazing help when the piece will go to the Natural History Museum next year around late springtime. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Any questions, please contact Martin Campbell, who's an associate producer of Mechanimal. And even better than that, we've got an analogue test this afternoon in this space. So I've brought along some flint stones, and we just put out some bits of paper on the floor and just asked people to imagine in the experience with certain provocations. That'll last just about half an hour with a sort of chat. If that kind of thing interests you, it would be really helpful for us if you want to be around and offer some thoughts. But yeah, thanks ever so much for coming, and yeah, see you later.
All right, I know we've run over, but just before you go, if you do want to stick around in Hot Desk today, find out more about what we do, please find one of the studio team, hands in the air. Yeah, there's loads of us here today. We'll be happy to help. If you're watching online, send us an email on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you all again same time next week.